Bonjour, my name is Julia Pegahmagabow. Je crois que Adictodem. I'm from the Caribou clan, and I am the um, founding, executive director and um, Nigon Akinoomoshin, so our lead teacher here for the Akinoomoshin Teaching Lodge. Akinoomoshin roughly translates to teach me, but within that word, um, we understand that um, learning is with a purpose, and it comes. It's on the land. It's built. K is the first part of that word, and so it's from the land, and it's about elevating um, our education and our learning um, in a way that's appropriate for Anishinaabe learners. Our target age group is elementary age, so early learners from age of 3 to 14, around that age when they would be completing elementary learning and preparing to transition to secondary education. So we are small. We have 2 learners enrolled with us right now, but so we hope to be inclusive to that age range in a small learning environment with a low student teacher ratio, and outside on the land, and as much as we can in the language, despite the fact that we don't have a fluent teacher, Anishinaabemowin teacher on our staff. Our staff is volunteer. We're a very new organization, um, and so we're in the process of looking for funding so that we can pay qualified educators, to pay language speakers, and to be able to pay land-based knowledge holders to come and work with us at Akinoomoshin. Our learning objective is to produce fluent speakers, and it's to provide that education in a land-based format, a land-based way of teaching. So we're outside every day, and we're learning from the land. We're picking up skills that aren't always practiced anymore. We are incorporating ceremony into our learning, um, and we are um, you know, starting from a place of spirit and spiritual wellness for our learners. Um, and I guess with that, um, we're hoping that we're not just um, making an impact with our learners, but we're making an impact with their families, with our community of learners and families, and within the community that we're situated in, and then the wider community, that the region that surrounds us. So working to build a relationship. Um, we there's a lot of work and a lot of effort right now, around decolonizing education. Um, but from my point of view, um, decolonization decolonization still puts the colonizer at the center of the thinking. So our preference is to say that uh, what we're we're trying to create here, what we're creating and building, is Anishinaabe-centered education, and center our ways of knowing and being, doing, and thinking, and teaching and learning. For the day to day, when we're talking about success, we actually don't do a lot of formal measurement. I don't do a lot of assessment of them in terms of writing down, a grade or assessing, specific skills. But when they are going home and they're helping their families, um, to say the words that they're learning in Anishinaabemowin, when they're teaching their families you know, what is an Anishinaabe way of thinking. For example, one of our learners went home and the family was saying goodbye to each other, and he corrected them. He stopped them and he said, "We don't say goodbye. We say bamapi." So it's things like that, or it's the transition of struggling to to get their ears around a second language, and being kind of resistant at first, but they do eventually. They've come to appreciate it, and they've come to make connections with other sounds in our language, and make connections with words. So just the way, for instance, zage gun or zage go, like about love, or we love, like we love you, zage go, and making a connection even to when it's snowing. Our word is zopo, but they, in their hearing and picking out parts of the word and the sounds in a word, can make the connections between those two words, and and even if sometimes they're not getting the word right, um, they're still trying and they're making the sounds. So it's really amazing to see that transformation. So those are the kinds of successes that I make note of, but they're not anything that goes into a formal report home, um, you know, and that at the end of the day, whether we're out on the lake or we're here in the yard, um, or we're up on the hill, that they have rosy cheeks, and they're excited to be in the bush, um, and having a place to go, um, and getting comfortable being in the bush, and learning from the land. When I went to Teachers College, um, and learned a lot about the First Nation, Métis, Inuit framework and the policies that were designed to increase and ensure that learners in Ontario were, in the public system, were going to be receiving, I guess, accurate and better informed education that was free from racism and stereotypes, um, and um, and that would promote a better relationship. That's really promising work, and there are a lot of people doing really wonderful work in the public education system. Um, but I feel that as an educator, uh, I I didn't feel that my strengths or my vision of education for Indigenous people um, uh, was I don't feel like that's enough sometimes. So what I'm trying to do, without othering Indigenous education, But and by calling it alternative, but to provide an option. I thought I could expand on what you know what programs like the FNMI framework are doing by not just integrating Indigenous knowledge in the learning, but centering Indigenous knowledge in the learning and making it the focus. So my goal, I guess, is is finding a way, and so finding my way to other like-minded people is finding a way to um, when you center Indigenous education or Indigenous knowledge and make it the core, um, is um, is again it's building from language. It's stepping out of the public education curriculum. It's it's um, it's changing and so we start with our language, we start with culture, we start with ceremony, we start with our ways of knowing, doing, and being, and making that the core, and then um, looking then to the opportunities to introduce Western knowledge, or Eurocentric or Euro-Canadian centric thoughts about how people learn, and incorporate that. Um, I do, sometimes in my desire for transformation, I get a little frustrated when I hear so much talk about integrating and integrating Indigenous knowledge into the learning. Was a little frustrating for me at times. So, but I do recognize that there's a place and there's a need for all of the approaches that are there, because not everybody has this much access to the land. Not everybody has this much access to knowledge holders and their, the grandparents, Akinoomoshin, and the Mino de Moyeg, those old men and those old women who hold the knowledge and hold the teachings, and are like the key to to land-based learning, to learning our language. Yeah. So, and the hope is that by centering that, it's a way that will positively impact, influence, um, a good, strong identity among Indigenous learners. So, so Indigenous education is kind of a good blanket term for, for learning, that's based in Indigenous ways of knowing for all the people of Turtle Island. But we're a little more specific here, and we're centering Anishinaabe knowledge. So, but still, still being, still ensuring that our education, our learning is inclusive of the other nations who all live on Turtle Island. Yeah. So, and when we talk about things like geography, we're not talking about North America or Canada, we're talking about Turtle Island. My personal vision is, that we'll have more programs like this, and that Indigenous education and pathways to knowing will be respected, and will be, because our ways of knowing, we were given a way of knowing by Creator. We were given a way to have a relationship with our Mother the Earth, with our relatives in creation, our human and non-human relatives. That was given to us, and we put it down in favor of another people's way of knowing and doing, and focusing on their priorities. And it hasn't necessarily been the best outcome for us. We have tremendous dropout rates, and we have a lot of young people struggle with identity, and then which leads to other struggles with things like addiction, because people don't know who they are, and they don't know where to look necessarily, so they don't have that right from the start of their life. And so if we can center our ways of learning and teaching, and make that the way, and make it recenter it as our standards. Our standards are phenomenal. Our standards are rigorous, and our standards, they're important. We wouldn't be here if we didn't have those standards. Our ancestors wouldn't have been able to survive through the winter if they didn't have those standards and the knowledge of what they needed to do to prepare to make it through a winter. Not all of those skills, some of them have been kind of made irrelevant, and because of technology, because of the ease of having things be easier to attain, or things need to be more efficient to be able to compete in the mainstream. We need language speakers, fluent language speakers. Whether they're first or second language speakers, they would be so helpful. Some of the first language speakers are getting on in their age. Their numbers are dwindling, and it's not easy for them to come, to get out on a daily basis. It's hard to find a speaker who's I guess thinking. There's a lot of Christianity has had a huge influence on our language and how people speak and understand. It's to things like how they name the days of the week, for instance, but even just other ideologies. So that influence being so strong, when we're trying to center Anishinaabe thought, that's sometimes a challenge for people. We've picked up and we've really learned the colonizers' way of thinking also.
Yeah.
Right? So religion aside, just the thinking about about community dynamics and how we govern ourselves, and how we are so structured under the Indian Act and the First Nation, or the divisions that the Indian Act has caused in Anishinaabe or Indigenous communities. Other resources is, when we're looking at how students progress through a learning system. So, we're developing curriculum here as we go. So that's a challenge for me, and so it's maybe building more resources for people who are really trying to understand Indigenous pedagogy